If you're someone watching who feels like they were discriminated against or maybe even coerced during lockdowns and the time of vaccine mandates, do you believe you've gotten all the answers you deserve from political leaders? I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, and today, on March 12th, I attended a town hall event for the leader of the BC United Party, Kevin Falcon, to ask for some clarification on where his party stands with things like vaccine mandates and Canada's Freedom Convoy, which largely oppose them. You're not going to want to miss this report. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, reporting to you from the Sandman Hotel, the location where the BC United Party had a Ask Anything town hall. This is the second one that Rebel News has covered. This time it's in Langley. Last time it was in Surrey. And good questions and answers were had at that one. But I wanted to ask a specific question that I have already actually asked the BC United Party before, but felt like their answer was a little watered down. Let me give you a little bit of a history. You see, in April 2023, BC's current NDP government went ahead and brought forth a motion seeking to have all the MLAs in the legislature condemn Canada's Freedom Convoy and also applaud vaccine mandates. I reached out to the BC United in January of 2024, earlier this year, shortly after the federal court ruled that the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act to stomp out the Freedom Convoy was unlawful, an abuse of power, and unconstitutional. I wanted to know for you, especially since this year is voting year for British Columbians, whether or not the BC United MLAs have changed their position on vaccine mandates, as well as the Freedom Convoy. But the response I got from the press secretary at the time didn't quite answer that. Let me read you some of it. The motion introduced by the NDP deliberately aimed to divide British Columbians more than 14 months after the events in Ottawa and more than 3 years after the start of the pandemic. Let's be clear, that motion and subsequent vote was a completely empty, meaningless, pointless waste of elected officials' time and had no legislative consequence. It was purely political theater orchestrated by the divisive NDP government, aiming to divide British Columbians. And then further down, it says that the BC United condemns such a divisive motion, but it didn't address what they think of vaccine mandates, you know, the ones that discriminated against so many Canadians and are still in place for BC's healthcare workers, even though there are facts that have come out that we've been reporting on for a long time now, such as the fact that these vaccines didn't stop transmission and that companies like Pfizer never even bothered to figure out if they did before British Columbians received them. And of course, since the federal court's ruling on the convoy.
I will speak in English so there are no misunderstandings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
I asked Mr. Falcon that question, what I just raised with you again in person, to get an answer for you. And here's what he had to say. What is your party's position on vaccine mandates and the Freedom Convoy?
Sure. So first of all, understand that this is a little bit inside baseball, but it's important your viewers know this. Monday morning motions are motions the NDP often put forward. This happens federally too, where they try to do these aha and try and catch the opposition to do something to change the channel when they're doing something extremely unpopular at the moment. So at that time, I think there was a big crime story and the NDP were panicked about it. So they try to put through a motion like this and hope we're stupid enough to vote against it so they can say, aha, see, and then they get all the media to stampede repeat over and say, oh, you see, this is now the issue. So we don't let them get away with that. And as an official opposition, we have an obligation to our supporters and the public to not be stupid and just walk into every trap the NDP try and set for us. I think that the way the convoy truckers were treated was appalling. No question about it. And that's why it went to court, and that's why the federal government got slapped on the wrist pretty hard over that. Because at the end of the day, I think virtually all of that could have been avoided by, frankly, the leadership of the federal government just saying, you know what, you've got concern. I'm going to sit down with you and listen out. Hear what you have to say, instead of just giving them the back of your hand. And I think had the Prime Minister taken that approach, I don't think there would have been the kind of protest and the kind of upset that was caused by people not being listened to. And the problem we have in society right now is, frankly, we got too many people trying to divide and not enough people trying to unite. We got to unite people together, and I think when we do that, we always get to better outcomes.
Okay, but similar to the response I received via email from your party, what is your response on vaccine mandates? If we were to see something like this happen again, what would your party do differently, or would you sort of fall in line like we saw happen during lockdown?
Look, I was involved when we dealt with some earlier crisis, H1N1, and we weren't sure how that was going to go and how bad that might be. So it's difficult when you're in government. You have to make sure you try and follow the best evidence and science as best you can, but you also have to be willing to adapt and do things differently. I don't want to blame government all the way through, because sometimes they're just trying to do the right thing. But clearly, when it comes to some of the mandates, they hung on for too long, they penalized too many, and I think what every government has to do is look back and learn and say, next time this happens, what do we do differently? We didn't get everything wrong. We continued to educate our kids and send them to schools, unlike a lot of the U.S. states that didn't. That was a big mistake. We now can look back and realize that was a big mistake. We got that right, at least in Canada for most provinces. But we always have to learn. We always have to figure out what we did wrong and what we can do better next time.
I know you got to go, but I just want to drill it down. You yourself said if the government, you should look at what happened, learn from it, and say, what could we do differently? Yep. That's essentially what I'm asking you here.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had some time to reflect on what's happened. What would your party do differently if you were to form government and we had the same sort of scenario come up where vaccine mandates were being suggested again? Well, what would you guys do differently?
Well, for starters, something I called for 2 years ago, get our unvaccinated workers back into our healthcare system. I just talked to someone tonight that had a relative that is still unable to work in our healthcare system in the midst of a crisis. Why is this still happening when we are the only jurisdiction in North America that is still saying that unvaccinated workers can't come back into our healthcare system? It's wrong. I would end it immediately. This is an ideological crusade led by Dr. Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix, because unless they have secret evidence that no one else has in North America, they're doing this for ideological reasons, and that's wrong, and it goes against the entire purpose of a chief public health officer.
I did my best to get a solid answer for you, but you let me know in the comments what you think about Mr. Falcon's answers. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. I intend to have my boots on the ground to bring you reports you can trust that bring you the other side of the story, but still what matters when it comes to voting in British Columbia. If you appreciate that I will be doing so, you can go to our special website called bcleadershipreports.com. You can see what reports I have there already, and also donate what you can to keep our independent journalism going strong. We appreciate your support.